Peace. I just wanted to take a moment and build a little bit about the 15th degree, or the 15th lesson in the 1 to 40s. And the lesson says, who is the 10%? And the answer to that lesson is, they are the rich slave makers of the poor who teach the poor lies to believe that the almighty true and living God is a spook in the sky, which can't be seen by the physical eye, otherwise known as bloodsuckers of the poor. Now, the two parts of that lesson I want to emphasize is rich slave maker, or trying to be rich, two, slave maker, and bloodsucker of the poor. And the reason why I wanted to build on this is because over time, I've started to notice that a lot of people in the so-called conscious community, the nationalistic community, whatever, are fitting the description of the 10%. You know, and for the most part, I think by the support that a lot of these people are getting, that obviously people are not identifying the actual traits or characteristics or methodologies that the 10% actually use in order to make slaves and bloodsuck the poor. Now, you know, today I just wanted to build on some of those traits and characteristics and also highlight some of the methodologies of how to identify these type of people. And you know, for those of you who have a legitimate job, you know, one thing that is a standard procedure or policy with getting any kind of employment here in this country is you fill out an application. Or, you know, you submit your resume or something along those lines. Now, in the process of filling out an application or submitting your resume, you are required to share your employment history. You know, where you worked at, what your job responsibilities and duties were, you know, for how long, if you're not there anymore, what was the circumstances behind why you're not there anymore. You know, you have to submit that information. Sometimes you may have to do a drug test. You may have to get a criminal background check. Then you got to submit references, you know, and that's just for just a basic job doing cashiering or even working. If you're working at like a fast food restaurant, you have to submit that information because the employer wants to know who you are and what qualifies you for the position. Now, if a person has to be qualified to do something like cashiering or something along those lines, how much more important is it for a person to be qualified to lead your life or to give you advice or to consult with you about your life? You know, whether they're calling themselves some kind of cosmophysicist or metaphysician or guru or spiritualist or healer or astrologist or whatever title, life coach, whatever they want to use, how much more important is it for them to be qualified to put your life and oftentimes the life of your children in their hands? And a lot of times when we get behind these people, a lot of us don't take enough time. What's going on, G? A lot of us don't take enough time to really assess or examine their history, you know, to find out about who references them. You know, what is their employment history? And one thing that I have noticed is that some of these people who are 10%, when you look at their employment history, they either have never had a job legitimately before, or their work history looks like Swiss cheese. You know, one or the other. It doesn't show a level of consistency over an extended period of time. Now, some of y'all may sit there and say, well, that ain't really important because, you know, they dedicated to our people, you know what I'm saying, and they don't really want to work for the man, so, you know, they just entrepreneurs. They've been doing their own thing. Yeah, right. Well, okay, if they're an entrepreneur and they've been doing their own thing over this extended period of time of never having no legitimate job, then if it's true entrepreneurship, then they should be able to show you a DBA. You know, doing business as certificate in the place where they live at to show and prove to you that it is a legitimate business. Either that or an EIN number, you know, a federal identification number when it comes to the business that they're actually doing. Also, if it's an organization that they're saying that they have in this, that, and the third, well, do they have a 501c3? Are they legitimately recognized as a tax-exempt entity? And if not, what other tax-exempt entity have they been working under as far as them being an umbrella for the different type of volunteer and not-for-profit activities that they've been doing in the community that they live in? There should be some kind of paperwork to substantiate their entrepreneurship or their organization or whatever they say that they're doing. Now, if you see a person and there's no real legitimate work history or things like that, some of you may say that ain't important. It's about what they're doing now, this, that, and the third. Well, here's where you're wrong. What it signals to you, especially if they're an adult, is how were they securing food, clothing, and shelter all of this time that they weren't working? Because they weren't doing it themselves legitimately, whether they had a business as an entrepreneur or, they don't have a job. So how are they securing food, clothing, and shelter? It's only one of three ways that they were doing it. Number one is they were just living off the system. Social services, HUD housing, they were getting food stamps. Whatever it was, the system was supporting them. They weren't doing it themselves. That's one way that they've been getting food, clothing, and shelter all of this time. And now there's some guru or, there's some metaphysician and, they're doing tarot card readings and palm readings and stuff like that. But that's how they've been. Some of these people have children, too. Keep that in mind. Over all of this period of time, they haven't been securing themselves food, clothing, and shelter. They've just been living off the system. And now they come out talking about they're going to lead people to the promised land. Another way that they've been securing food, clothing, and shelter is, they may have just been providing services for people with the skills that they actually have and just making money off the books. It may be legitimate, but that may be the way that they've been securing food, clothing, and shelter over an extended period of time. Now, the problem with that is that there's no work history. There's no way to really substantiate or to track what they've been doing. So that's a little sketchy, Now, the third way is these people just been hustling people. They just grimy. They've been manipulating people, and people been taking care of them for however long period of time. They've never really had no legitimate job. Their food, clothing, and shelter comes from their mouthpiece or manipulating other people to take care of them. Now, like I said, if a person is putting themselves in the position to be somewhat of a leader and to guide people, you should have no problem with asking them to show and prove or to demonstrate their qualifications to be in that type of position. Not just because of their mouthpiece, but to have some legitimate paperwork to substantiate why they're qualified to be in that position. Because if not, then like I said, that means there were other ways that they've been securing food, clothing, and shelter over an extended period of time. And the problem with that is when you have a person who is running a legitimate business, they are an entrepreneur. They can show you that. Or they do have a legitimate job and they've been working and have an employment history that has been consistent over a period of time. They're in a different position than a person that doesn't have that. The difference is a person that has a legitimate job or who is running a legitimate business, the projects or the activities or the events that they're doing, they don't necessarily need your support. For the matter of fact, they're putting more money and energy and sweat equity into those events themselves because they have a legitimate job or a business that they're funneling the money through in order to make that a successful event. So they're not dependent on people the same way somebody that ain't got no legitimate job needs you. And that is a problem. Sometimes people put themselves in a position where they make slaves because they need you to secure food, clothing, and shelter. And they blood suck the poor because it's not like they're really working every day legitimately or they're running a legitimate business. No, whatever they're doing, they need you to support them. And that is not a sustainable or an equal relationship to establish with your constituency or with your supporters. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you're living off of them. And some of these people who are putting themselves in these positions, you can clearly see that they're doing that because there's nothing in their history or their past or in their references to show you that they've been doing something over a consistent period of time, taking care of themselves. Other people have been taking care of them, the system been taking care of them, or whatever else it is, and now they've so-called metamorphosized into this this spiritualist or this metaphysician or whatever they want to call themselves, and they need your support. They need your support. So the reason why I'm emphasizing these type of traits and characteristics and methodologies that they use is because when we say that they're the 10%, the base that they are able to blood suck are who we call the 85%. They're the blind, deaf, and dumb. Those are the people who are following these people and supporting these people. And it's kind of like, instead of putting it in a context where you're just calling people out, like sometimes you may see some of these debates online on YouTube and stuff like that, and you got people pointing fingers and saying, you doing this, you doing that. When a person has a strong support base, even though they're completely wrong, you standing there pointing the finger and calling them out personally, that ain't going to do nothing but gain more support for them. It's kind of like going to church on Easter Sunday with some documents talking about you going to expose the pastor and stuff for taking money from the people in the congregation. Now you sit there and wait for the pastor to do his speech and stuff like that, to do his sermon for the day, and you stand up in the middle of the congregation waving these documents around talking about you robbing the people, you just doing that. You know what the congregation going to do? They're going to turn around, look at you, call you the devil, get the ushers to escort your ass out, and then the next thing they're going to do is pass that plate around. And they're going to have a on-the-spot, they're going to have an on-the-spot tide going on. And people going to probably give them more money than what they was willing to give them for in the first place, because now they didn't cast the devil out. So you don't necessarily want to use that method when it comes to people who you really see are 10% off of others by calling them out by name, because people are just going to look at you like you a hater. So the best thing that you can do is you can talk about the traits, you can talk about the characteristics, you can talk about examining the methods that these people are using, and leave it up to other people to make that decision on their own in regards to identifying who's an actual 10%er or not. And like I said, if people can assess it for themselves and come to their own understanding, then once you do or see it for what it actually is, withdraw your support. Withdraw your support. Because people like that, they're only in a position to make slaves and blood suck the poor. And the thing about it is, when a person is not really sustaining themselves and securing food, clothing, and shelter on their own, and they need you to do it for them, like I said, it's not a level of equality. Which means, going back to that being the 15th lesson, or knowledge power, politics is the science of power. It's the ability to use influence to achieve whatever objective that you're trying to achieve. It doesn't necessarily mean that politics are negative or positive. It is based upon the objective or how you're striving to influence and motivate people. Now, in regards to this knowledge power degree, their ability to use their politics, or to politic with people, or to use their mouthpiece, they're using it so that they can enslave people, so that they can keep people on a certain level to support them. They're not really striving to empower people. And one thing that you'll see also with people like this is they're not really striving to put information out to put you on the same level as them. One thing that you will see them doing consistently is keeping themselves up here. Let me show you this. Keeping themselves up here and keeping other people down there. Because they don't want you to have access to the same information or things that they so-called have access to, because now you won't need to support them. And if you don't need to support them, how are they going to secure food, clothing, and shelter? So when you look at the Bible and it talks about how Yeshua, or Jesus, or our righteous brother, was teaching men how to fish, that was a statement of empowerment. He was striving to put people in the same position that he was in. He wasn't just rationing them off little pieces of fish. And that's what some of these 10%ers are doing. That's why you see them doing a retreat over here, or doing a little lecture over here, or doing this little event right here, or every time they do these things, they're rationing off a little bit of themselves at a time to keep you coming back, to keep you feeling like you need them. When you look at a lot of these videos that I put up, I empower you. I give you the same exact information that I have so that you can utilize it in yourself, in your life, so that you can be in the same position or place that I am in. I don't hold nothing back. And I'm not striving to take advantage of people or to make myself rich off other people's labor, because I understand what equality means, and I don't need people to secure my own food, clothing, and shelter. I'm doing that myself. You know, so these are some of the things that you always need to identify and assess in people before you really get behind them and give them all your support. You know, first of all, ask yourself the question, what is their history? You know, what is their employment history? If they have not worked legitimately over a period of time, I mean, that means a lot of different things. It could mean that they're not employable, which means that they're not even really willing to work. You know what I'm saying? And that is usually the mentality of a slave maker. They ain't really striving to work like that. You know, another thing that it could mean is that they don't work well with others, or they may not be able to take orders from people. There's a lot of these different things that you need to find out for yourself before you get behind people, putting money in their pocket, supporting them, and they off over here in a distant land living off, you know, living in some tropical paradise, or they over here living in this big ass house and stuff like that, and you squandering your money talking about you putting all your money and support behind these people. Don't ever do that. Never do that. Especially if you have children. Especially if you have children, you know, and anybody that is in a position of being a man and a woman of the people sacrifice the things that they have in order to be in that type of position. They're not just put in that position because they need your support. They're also demonstrating that they support other people. If they're asking you for $100 to do this and the third, then they should likewise be able to show and prove to you that they are actually giving $100 to support somebody else's event and function. It should never be no one-way street shit. And that is something else that you need to take in consideration. If they're getting money, you know, $50 for this, you should also see them giving $50 over here for that other person's event. If they're not being reciprocal like that, then they're only taking. If they're only taking, that is a parasitic relationship. And if it's a parasitic relationship, that means they're blood-sucking the poor. They're making slaves. They're not giving back. They're just standing there talking about what they're doing, but they're not really doing anything. So I will that all that I'm saying is clear, because it's very, very important. We don't need people like that who are taking advantage of our people and people in general who are interested in growth and development. They want to get in a different place in their life. They want to solve their problems. We don't need people who are selling them lies and getting your support, why in reality they're only supporting themselves when it really, really comes down to it. So with that said, please listen to the things that I'm saying. And if you identify people who are actually doing this, withdraw your support. Don't support them. Peace.